Good morning. Welcome back to my subject that I was discussing, and that is that the people are normally not poor. It's a paradox. I fully appreciate that. But this paradox is true to a great extent, and we should know it that the politicians always want to pose as saviors. They may not be, but they want to pose. They think by giving freebies or by giving them utopia, they'll be successful. And that's what happened in Chile recently. In Chile, they made a draft constitution which would have converted that country into a country of milk and honey. But the people rejected that. And this is for the first time I've seen that the crowd has common sense which mob may not have. This utopian constitution gave people assured housing, free housing, jobs, constitutional rights, legislative digital disconnection. But it would have caused the country to go on debt. And can you live on debt? It's like a human being or an individual coming and living in as a borrower all the time. A borrower can never be happy. So this verdict of the people of Chile creates optimism of the wisdom of the crowds. And I developed a concept called nirvana fallacy. It's a fallacy, what people call it. It compares the existing pragmatic and second best solutions to idealistic but imperfect and unrealistic ones. And that's what the politicians do. People want to show that they are perfectionists. Gribi hatao, remove poverty. That was a humbug. But this caused to the economic decisions causing the pain. It has caused pain in India. It has caused pain in Sri Lanka, Venezuela, Mexico, Bolivia, name it as a country. I agree that we pose as a welfare state, but if borrowing for the spending could make countries rich, then no country would be poor. What is needed is that the people should be having sustainable, high-paying jobs. And what you need to do? You need to do that. Not give them freebies, but create conditions. And you would find that if you have a balanced, targeted, policy-induced price distortions are removed, problems would be needed. So what do? The state governments must create sustainable, high-paying jobs by raising the productivity. And this has to be done at 5 places. A, the productivity has to be increased in states, provinces, cities, sectors, firms, and skills. And you will find nobody will be poor. Now look at India. The inequality between states. In the next 2 decades, 6 states in South and West India will have 35% of GDP growth, but only 5% of the population growth. What happens is when there is economic complexity, higher wages are there. And that is why Maharashtra, Gujarat, Kerala, Karnataka, Telangana are on the uptrend. So you have got to reduce the inequality between the states. Then I said cities. Yes. Reduce inequality between cities. Look at this complexity. Hyderabad as a city has higher GDP than the whole of province of Odisha. And it has 4 times higher GDP than Jammu and Kashmir. Third, reduce inequality between different sectors. For example, software is an oasis of high firm productivity, but employs only 8% of the labor force. On the other hand, look at agriculture. 42% of the labor force, but generates only 16% of GDP. So people have to be removed from agriculture to the other field. The farm policy, as initiated earlier, small farms, is absolutely no. Create big farms, mechanize them, and use people for the other jobs. And this is what China did. As a matter of fact, I'm going to discuss China on Monday. China increased per capita, not GDP, but per capita income 80 times in 40 years. Can you imagine it? Per capita? So GDP automatically goes up. And what did they do? They moved 700 million people from the farm to the non-farm employment. Now this was a miracle. Moving 700 million people from agriculture to the towns, you have built infrastructure, you have to create jobs, you have to build industry, and that's what they do. Then another factor, I refer to the 5 factors. Reduce the difference between the firms. India's largest and smallest manufacturing companies are 24 times difference in productivity. Now look at Australia. The difference in productivity in the small and the large firm is from 1.2% to 3.5%, period. Here in India is 24 times. The larger production houses have 24 times higher productivity than the smallest houses. Our concept is gone. You see, the small scale should be a feeder industry to the large scale industry. So what really happens is that those countries or those states or those cities that replace deals with the rules by reducing regulatory system attract high paying jobs and the poor people are no longer poor. Now other reforms are also required. You have to increase the soft skills, which we are not doing. Wages are higher for using minds than muscles. And I'm so enamored what Australia has done. Or even Canada. States having higher population of residents with skills will attract high paying jobs. You see, I gave an example. When I said the places. It's like honey. You place honey in a bowl and you will see all the ants and all the flies will be attracted to that. Place the honey in another place and they'll go there. So you create the honey and the people will come there and they'll be happy. Then another thing that's required is that there is no delegation. Empower the cities. And that empowering can be done by devolution of funds, by devolution of functions, and functionaries. Why should mayor of a city in Canada have almost the same power, barring certain factors, which a prime minister would be having or the premier would be having in their own circles? But can it happen in India or in Pakistan or in Sri Lanka? No. Then you have to create the supply that will attract demand, and that would mean providing skills to the workers in advance for the manufacturing industry. And this is what Karnataka did. And this is what Telangana did. What they did was they created skills in advance, and that's why the software industry in 1980 they deregulated engineering colleges. And that was a watershed. Then you need formalization. State governments generate more than 75% of India's 67,000 plus compliances. Every company has to have compliance rules, filing of the papers, and criminal provisions. So when it was calculated, it was seen that more than 75% of 67,000 compliances, 6,700 plus filings, and 26,410 employer criminal provisions, they have got to be removed. You remove them, people automatically will be attracted to be self-sufficient. They don't need the jobs then. Then our civil service are highly irrational. The promotion based on time basis. What we do is we punish good performers by promoting bad performers, because bad performers, what they do is they go and butter up the bosses, the political bosses, who are incompetent by themselves. But then they are serving the needs of the political bosses, so they get it. Then you have got to digitize. Set a 12-month target for paperless and cashless for all citizens' interfaces, leveraging unique stack of public goods. India's problem is not of wages, it's not of poverty, no. Wages will not rise. Poverty would not be decreased without balanced targeting of policy-induced price reductions. We need to restore policy balance. And what we need to do is target poor people by transforming poor places. We unfortunately do the other way around. We want to transform people, not the places. We forget that honey given by a dropper would not attract flies. Keeping it in a bowl will attract flies. Create infrastructure. And that's why, if you remember, I have talked so often of that. New York was a poor city, very poor. And when 1930s depression was there, it was terrible. So Roosevelt came as president and he said, hire two sets of the people in the daytime. One set will collect leaves, put them in the sacks and place them on the sidewalks. Comes the evening, the second set of the people will come and they would scatter the leaves, and the first set will again come next morning and start collecting the leaves. So you gave them, created the situation. And people started, they said, look here, we are doing here is a minimum job, we are getting it, but why should I not do? There the minimum facility has been filled up. So parasites were not there. What most of the countries are doing, and most of the politicians do, is they create parasites. And they create poverty. Poor people are the creation of the politicians, not by themselves. By saying that they are removing poverty, in fact, they are trying to make them poor by having absolutely useless and even sometimes harmful actions. What you need is something different. You need is to create and transform the places. And once you transform the places, people will not be poor. As I said in the beginning, and as the title says, they are not poor people. They are poor by design, by placement, and by inactivity. Keep them activity, redesign their system, make the places attractive. It's as simple as that. You want to be what you are, and you want to pose more than what you are. That's what always happens. You want to show people. So if you create that psychological attitude, and how you can do it? First, create infrastructure. And I was impressed when I was informed that, for example, in Haryana, even the inter-villages are now connected with the metal roads. And that's making poor people rich. But we have got to adopt the Chinese system of moving people from non-productive jobs to productive jobs. And that was a monumental task, moving 700 million people and thus increasing per capita income 80 times. As I said, I'll discuss this point, the Chinese example, in detail on Monday. But the whole thing devolves to one point, and that is that given the proper policy and building up places, you automatically build up people, raise their expectations, make them work towards the goal of being rich, create goals, and people will try to reach them. Thank you.